Hi, everybody. How you doing? I'm on time. I usually am on time. Um, is the sound and everything okay? Hi, Dark Star. Oh, I'm glad you liked it. Hi, Andrew. Oh, good. Okay, well, I think I'm getting this morning I had a problem with getting the comments down. Hi, Mark. Truman. Hey, Graham. Tony. How you guys doing? Thanks, Mark. Hi, Adam. Hola. ¿Qué tiene? Hi, Tim. Gustav. Alberto. How you doing, man? Um, from your store, I don't have a store. I suspect it might be warmer there than it is in the UK for once. Well, let's see. We're we're covered with snow. I had a hard time making it out of the driveway today, but we're about oh just under 40 degrees. But then it's going to freeze tonight, and so we're going to have ice all over the place. And then tomorrow it'll thaw out again. We're having a very strange winter. We haven't had much of anything until about a week ago, and that's our a New England winter is very different than that. Oh, you like my strap? This is a Jean Rousseau strap that I got for my Lyrique Etude number one. Yeah, I really like their straps. I like the shiny gator. Um, the one that came with it, uh, I liked a lot too, but this one I just like better. Autocorrect. Okay. How you doing, Kinosaki? Yeah. And unfortunately, they're not a deal. Okay. Let's talk about what I wanted to talk about today was the hang on a second. There it is. What I wanted to talk about are new trends in watch collection. And the there are a number of things happen. New trends can happen from the manufacturer's point of view. One of the biggest trends I think that did happen was sort of I guess you might even call it the invention of high horology. Uh, the Swiss watch industry was just getting flattened by quartz watches that they call the quartz crisis, and they're just all of these cheap watches came out. And one of the things that uh, the Swiss decided, well, let's see if we can have we'll sort of put together this special kind of watch that they wanted to call high horology, uh, gold and some other aspects to it. The movement, especially, they were really pushing in-house movement by the watch manufacturer. And I think what they were trying to do was to sort of get back all of the, instead of having cheap, and I should say inexpensive rather than cheap, movements from outside of Switzerland. They wanted to sort of coalesce around Swiss, and there are a number of companies that did that and were very successful. Not all of them were. One of the reasons that so many well, I guess you could call them historical companies are owned by groups like Swatch and Richemont because they would have gone broke otherwise. I mean, these are companies like Jaeger-LeCoultre, Vacheron Constantin. They were barely hanging on, and so that was sort of a trend that they started, that to sort of reintroduce or recapture this audience who really wanted to have Swiss watches. Well, it's gone through a number of iterations. I think at the beginning of the 21st century, you had a new kind of watchmaker. People like F.P. Journe, Vianney Halder, all of these Caribou and Lannon, and who were like real watchmakers in the sense that they wanted to make mechanical watches not as ones that were for mass production, but rather for sort of a special audience. And F.P. Journe, of course, is a great example of somebody who's very successful. One thing about F.P. Journe that I don't see with a lot of these guys is that he was a good businessman. Same thing with Caribou and Lannon, but other ones they just weren't. Something would always happen to him. Daniel Roth, Roger Dubuis, some of these other guys, they were just Marco Lang. Uh, they just weren't, and then they certainly they were interested in sort of having these really great watches that were expensive, but there were other things about it that they, in order to keep going on a day-to-day basis, they ended up having to sell off to investors, and eventually the investors took over. More recently, the investors took over Urban Jurgensen, but it's led by Caribou and Lannon, so he has the kind of values I think that they wanted to have. And so, in terms of trends, what happened was that I think this really cracked up the trend. The high, the really high level watches that used to be uh, Rolex, Omega, and some of those that were considered to be having a big tradition and were top watches. Yeah, they're still top in sort of a mass market sense, but in terms of other ways, not as much. Omega again was bought by Swatch along with Tissot and all of these other ones, and so the the post-pandemic market shot so many of these really good watches like FP Journe out of sight. I mean, they just went right beyond what people could afford. Um, and so, you know, you end up with a new trend. Now, there's one of the ones I think that came along with it were companies that were sort of I call garage funded, sort of Yelp funded, or somehow they were crowd funded, and they would come out with something, and they were here and gone. Some other ones that were to attracting what collectors were going to do or collectors wanted to do. This is what Larique was started. I mean, here were a bunch of guys who took a look they've been saving up, let's say, to buy a Chronomet Blue from FP Journe. And they went from, if you were lucky, you could actually get them maybe for 18,000. They went up to over 100,000. I mean, boom, just like disappeared. And other watches of the same sort of Laurent Ferrier, Gronfeld, a lot of those, they just you couldn't afford them anymore. Gronfelds went from 20 something to 40 something, and then they weren't available. I mean, they just weren't available. So I don't know. One of the trends. There's some other ones too, where a group of collectors got together and went to a watchmaker and had them make a special watch. There's a group called the Collective. Are any of you guys in the Collective? Yeah. Hi, Dan. What did I teach back in the day? Oh, well, those are some of the books I published. That'll give you a hint. Computer books, criminology, sociology, research methods. That's pretty much it. Um, I think niche and bespoke has grown in basically every area of commerce. Yeah, yeah, I think it has. One of the thing, Gustav, though, is that the bespoke and the ones that are, oh, let's say, they're very expensive, and they're the bespoke ones. I mean, in order to have a bespoke watch, other than, having a crowd of people buy them, can be very expensive. I had a friend who bought a Wooten Lannon, and, after a certain period, he was just really fed up with it because it took so long, and I think that those kinds of watches have a hard time making it. I mean, just if someone's going to take a just doing these bespoke watches, there's a whole slew of young watchmakers right now, in from France and Switzerland and Germany and some other places, who Peterman Bedat. That's another one. Um, these guys uh, can't keep up with the demand, and but the demand, we're talking just a handful of people who can afford them, and so I mean, that's why I don't know if it'll ever be a trend or not, so much as sort of a, one way, not for the collectors and the watch buyers, but rather for certain very talented watchmakers who, what they want to do is to just make a few watches. For example, you take Daniel Roth. I recently sold my Daniel Roth. It was a chronograph, and I, but what I was able to get it for and sell it for were a fraction of what a Daniel Roth would cost, like 100,000, 200,000. I mean, really crazy kinds of things. And I think that rather than saying, well, I guess I'll just take any watch or anything that's available, I think a lot of collectors are saying, let's look at something else. Anyway, that's the trend. I mean, if you there is, to some extent, there's an economic limit. Okay, I I've had a pretty much of an economic limit, but I've been able to, sort of ferret out certain things and was able to build a collection around. There's something called selling too soon. Well, is buying too soon. In other words, buy before it becomes popular, or just sort of out of sight. Not because you're looking at it from an economic point of view, but rather you found something of horological value that not being examined otherwise. This has been pretty much what I've been doing. Anyway, um, okay, how you doing, Brian? The harborings, but all these independents are even more harder to get and often pricier. Yeah, Truman, that sort of puts your finger on it. I do have a harboring Felix, and I it the one I got, and when I got it. It was this perfect little watch. Everything was just ran beautifully, and still is a great little watch. And but like you say, they are sort of unusual. Harboring Marie and Richard Harboring are so unusual in in the watch business, and they've been very successful at it. And I think they're able to do it by keeping it small. I mean, if they tried to go big time, they'd run into all kinds of issues. Hi, JJ. Graham, you're getting yours on Tuesday. Great. Graham is referring to his this to his Lyrique Etude number one. Now that let's talk about that. When we started this, God, I've been a couple years now. When we started the project, um, we didn't know whether it was going to work or not. We had no idea. I mean, it was the pandemic was sort of there and not there. In fact, we did start during the pandemic, and then it just wouldn't work out, and then we cranked up again later on, and that's when it did work. And it's I guess it was 2021 when we were started again, and then all through 2022, we thought we were going to have it, and I think first time it was that we hoped to get it was back in July, and now we're just finishing off getting it, not because of anything nefarious or anything like that, but all kinds of stuff happened on the production end that was became very time consuming. Hi, Alexi, how you doing? I'm starting a brand since I've decoded 12 ones of the Bible. There'll definitely be watches and bracelets. Okay. Uh, Social media blew up the high horology independence. You know, Adam, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I don't know if blew up would be the right term, but they did make them uh, more 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 knowledgeable. Hey, Donald, how you doing, man? Andrew finally got. Oh, you got your Harboring 2 on order. Way to go. I've been looking at the Harboring repeater a little out of my reach. Yeah, that's a neat watch, though, Brian. Yeah, yeah, Rancher. That's a point. One of the things that somebody mentioned about this early on, I had noticed it but didn't think about it, was the winding was so pleasant. One of the first watches that I got with where I really noticed the winding was this Patek Philippe Calatrava, and in winding the thing, I always equated it to you you like putting your finger in a box of jewels and just turning it, and you could feel the jewels, and it would turn very easily. What a what a trip! Graham is in for a wonderful treat. De Bethune is independent. Another out of yeah, Truman. That's another one. A very good one. See, this is the thing: is that it's not for the lack of great watchmakers and watches. Gerbeau Forcé. There's so many of them, but they make so few watches, and their prices are so high. And with the young and talented ones that are coming out of the watchmaking schools, they're they're going in a different direction, which is basically they want to be another I don't know, more like Haribo and Lannon than, I mean, they that kind of level of watchmaking, and they've been doing it, and they've been getting the kind of there's this French guy who makes these really beautiful watches, and a lot of them are key wound watches. I don't think he can keep up with the demand. When he first had when he first came out, I think one his first one was like $30,000, something like that. No. The Felix Salmon and the Irwin. Those are nice. I swear, when you go out, don't wind it up all the way so you can share it with your friends. It's so true. Hi, Gustav. Isn't R&D, horology are not always very expensive? Innovation is one thing and will always be expensive. Exclusivity is something else. Um, Gustav, there are two kinds of R&D, all right? And one is far more expensive than the other. You take a movement, create a movement for, let's say, a very limited distribution. That's is that can be expensive, but not really killer expensive. Where your real expenses come is when a new movement comes out and they have to work out the mass production of that. The That's where you get a really that becomes very expensive and very hard to do, because one of the things about a bespoke movement is that you don't have machines that put everything together for you. You have to have a watchmaker who will put the movement together. Then you have to have a watchmaker that'll put the case and the movement and the dial and all of that together. And that's just time consuming. And another way of putting time consuming is that if you're paying by for the time, then the price goes up. But it doesn't have to be crazy. I mean, this is one of the things we learned, I think, with the Larique experience. It's done. We got the price kept going up because, again, we were sort of like in the first post pandemic and all. And when people, they couldn't show up to work because they tested positive for COVID and all kinds of things like that. And plus the fact that we were doing something new and we really cared about horology. I mean, really good horology, not something that, you could off the shelf. And but it was doable. I mean, see, the thing that where your expenses come in is in your marketing and advertising and all of that. That's very expensive. And then you kick in 50% discount for your AD, you know, you've got to jack up the price. And we were going by, at least what I was going by was on a 10-to-1 ratio, 10 times the retail price times the manufacturing cost. Now, that that formula is one that's used in a lot of different types of businesses, and it doesn't have to be 10-to-1, but it's more than a multiple of, it's more than doubling it. I mean, if you have to double the price and then half of it has to go to the AD and the other half has to go to manufacturing, you're not gonna stay in business doing that. Well, um, Graham, I other than the fact with old technology, you're mad anyway, right? Hey, Alberto. I think that in general, with such high demand, many consumers drive away from very hot brands. Rolex first, but then FP Journe, till recent brands like Ming, the end. Don't know how, but vintage went up. Oh, yeah. You know why vintage went up or any of the other ones go up as soon as there's a shift from something more expensive to less expensive becomes more expensive. Hi, Belvia, man. 1950s JLC winding is a delight. Strangely, I have a Hamilton that winds beautifully. You know, I I don't know why a watch is easier or harder to wind. My FP Journe is sort of typical and windy, and it's not doesn't sort of float. Uh, the same with my Vacheron Constantin, the H Moser. All of them have sort of a they don't wind, they don't sort of float through a wind on it, but ours does, and I don't know how they did that. So I'm glad they did, though. My Blanc Pond had the same sweet winey feeling. Yeah, I'll tell you, that's right. My Parmigianis, unfortunately, I guess, both of my Parmigianis are automatics, and so I don't have to wind them too much. 40 turns, and then the rest of it is done by the rotor. I've got a Hebdo and a Moser Henry. They're close to Larique, but not quite. Yeah, I don't have the Hebdo, but I do have a Henry, and they're not a bad wine. They're just like Rancher said. There's something about the way this thing winds. It's just sort of a floats. You can wind it like this. Come here. Good stuff. Do you think the way forward for collectors is to come together to have smaller amounts of watches made, no advertisement, etc.? I don't know. I think you know um, it's really hard to say. There are really good watches you can make for a lot less than what we spent. For examples, Chronode. You can get a Chronode movement for about $1,000 if you've got, get a bunch of guys together. The same thing with Vaucheur. And Vaucheur provides, you can get the case and some other stuff from Vaucheur as well. And they're excellent movements. I mean, really excellent movements. But they're what I call off the shelf. In other words, they're already available for you. One of the things with, I think, probably both Chronode and to some extent Vaucheur, you can get them with different modules in them. In other words, um, on a watch we have planned down the road, they'll be having to put in a whole new module for us. And on that one, they're going to have to redo the movement in order to do that. Whereas the ones they made for Vaucheur and some of the ones they made, excuse me, for Chronode, they were sort of set up that way in the first place. Richard Harboring, I think this was his early ones. They were very much set up for adding components to it. And it was funny. I don't know if that is true with the A11 or not. But that's another way that you can sort of set up some kind of base so that you can have several different um, modules added to it, and then that way you can keep the basic uh, the base to it, and then add to it. Um, that sort of thing. This watch, this is my Chanel, Monsieur uh, Chanel. The thing about this watch that's interesting is that it is you can't add modules to it. The movement was made specifically for the jumping hour and the retrograde minutes. And one of the things I was reading about it, and they said it was made, but it's not the kind of watch that can be, you say, okay, well, let's get out the Chanel number one is what they call the caliber number one, and we'll add a module to it, and that'll be a power reserve indicator or something like that. They can't do that with this because the everything was made specifically for that movement and everything else. There aren't a lot of movements that I know of that are that sort of specifically created for that. Max ran HW and got his friends to collaborate his pieces. Yes, MBNF is another really cool example. Hey, Wan Gang, custom keyboards have been doing group buys for years. I think some very small independent watch brands like to do like this as a strategy. You know, it makes a lot of sense for a small brand to do that. Hi, Chai's Home Videos. Hello from Australia. Hi. Good day. In retrospect, your etude was a bargain. Oh, in pre-spec, it was a bargain. There's so many things that they added to it that were oh, what do you call that? I forget there's a legal term for things that only you can use on that. Uh-oh, my time is well, I started on time today. I probably ought to end near time. Okay. Waiting for the Chanel. Way too easy. Um, okay, how is a winding feel on a 1921? Truman, that whines and whines and whines and whines and whines. I have, you know, I wondered why the 4400. I don't know if anybody else has any other Vesteron content in 4400s. There was originally came in the 1921, but then they also had it in just about any of the hand wound they had. What that is like is the forever wind, it seems. What they did, apparently, they got a pretty strong spring in there. And by the way, that watch keeps almost perfect time. It's a wonderful watch in that respect. But it's like a bicycle, you know, when you're going up a steep hill and you have to drop it to a really low gear, and so you end up pedaling like that, and but you're going up the hill slowly. I think that's what's inside of the 4400. You've got this gearing so that you don't have to wind, so it's not hard to wind because of the strong mainspring, but you gotta like the bicycle trying to go up the hill, they have to drop into a little thing. That's what the 21 is like. On the other hand, you get to hold that thing and look at that big hunk of gold or platinum, whatever you have it in, and it's not exactly hard time. It's a lot of fun. My new Grail watch is a Laurent Ferrier. Is there anything comparable, less expensive? I don't know. My advice for the Laurent Ferrier, if you want one, definitely it's one watch that you need to try on ahead of time. Okay, I'll say that and no more. Just try it on and see how you like it. I love the designs of those watches. So I have a 1926 Elgin car watch, very tassel winding. Triple calendar is on my list. I love that watch. Yeah, Truman. Yeah. Anyway, well, look, guys, I'm going to behave today. I was on time. I got a time to go. Thank you all for taking some time today and getting getting everything sort of straightened out. Okay, take care, be safe, and see you next week.